Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Zimbabweans continue to call on SADC to deny Zanu PF political legitimacy. This is wishful thinking. Life is like mathematics. When you're in grade 1, you learn simple arithmetic. 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. And as you progress, you learn the times tables. 2 times 2 is equal to 4, and so forth. And by the time you reach secondary school, you're now learning about triangles, trigonometry, Pythagoras theorem. If you go to high school, it gets more and more complicated. We may not wish it, but in truth, life is complicated. Those who keep on asking for SADC to deny Zanu PF political legitimacy are no more than somebody in high school trying to solve calculus problem by applying the same simple arithmetic of grade 1. It doesn't work that way. Here is some people demonstrating. Let me say from the outset, there's no doubt that the spirit is willing. But in this particular case, this is a case where one can say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Good intentions are not going to get Zimbabwe out of the mess we are in. We need to think.
Our independence, but people are not enjoying the independence. It seems as if instead of going forward, we are going backwards. And if SADC is written in black and white that the elections were stolen, why is it that they are being lenient on Mnangagwa? And it was also said that he is an illegitimate president. Why are we still celebrating him as president and yet he stole the elections? I think it's high time SADC should respect the populace of Zimbabwe. People are not happy and it's there, the writing is on the wall. Let's not hide behind the finger. Let's solve Zimbabwe issues. Mnangagwa must go. We need to celebrate our country. The majority are suffering. The majority are not happy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, there is no denying that the majority of Zimbabweans are suffering. There is no denying that SADC's report on last year's elections was very categorical. Those election processes were flawed and illegal. SADC, as the regional body, endorsed that report, but they did not deny Mnangagwa political legitimacy. They SADC denied Zanu PF political legitimacy in 2008, following that year's blatantly cheating in the March election and the wanton violence that followed. Why did SADC not do the same last year? That is, on the surface, a logical question. But when one has got to say as a Zimbabwean, you should know that the situation back in 2008 and the situation today are totally different. This is coming back to the example I was giving earlier on, that you cannot expect to solve a calculus problem by applying the simple arithmetic rules of grade 1. Zimbabweans should know that the situation in 2008 and the situation today are totally different. They have had the benefit of hindsight. They should know by now. What do I mean they're different? Well, for a start, 2008 SADC denied Zanu PF political legitimacy. And they were the force behind getting Zanu PF to sign the global political agreement, which gave birth to the GNU. The primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop the blatant cheating and the wanton violence of 2008 repeating itself. That was the primary purpose. And for any Zimbabweans who, even now, with the benefit of hindsight, does not understand that, that is your problem. And you are trying to impose your ignorance on SADC. SADC should apply the same rules in 2008 as now as in 2008, regardless of what has happened then. That's totally meaningless. SADC were the sponsors of the global political agreement, and they were the guarantor of that agreement. And credit where credit is due. The GNU had the opportunity to transform Zimbabwe politically. The problem came with MDC. Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office. And the rest was history. They failed to implement even one token reform in the 5 years of the GNU. They had been participating in flawed elections ever since, out of greed. You ask the same Zimbabweans who are now saying SADC must do something. They either participated in last year's election or they were on the sideline, those in the diaspora, cheering and applauding, or at best said nothing. SADC found itself in 2023. They were the observers of those elections, and they condemned them, and rightly so too. The election process was flawed and illegal. The question that must be asked by any thinking Zimbabwean out there is, why did Zimbabweans participate in a flawed election? And there are millions, not just a few hundred, no, millions. Nearly 2 million voted for Chamisa alone, according to the results. And one can guess that probably 3 to 4 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora cheered and applauded the process. Why did you cheer and applaud a flawed process? I believe that SADC leaders, as much as they saw the report and they agreed that the process was flawed, they found themselves in a situation where they had to say, well, what can we do about it? If Zimbabweans themselves are happy to participate in a flawed electoral process, and they participate in their millions, is it really SADC's role to step in and say, we still do not recognize this result? Mnangagwa is illegitimate. And even if they were to do that, they will also ask themselves, if we were to declare Mnangagwa illegitimate, what then? Form another GNU with whom? The same people. Worse still, the GNU in 2008 was at least better in the sense that the opposition could be identified, the leadership. That in 2023 was another kettle of fish. CCC did not even have a party constitution, elected officials. It was just Chamisa and the few around him. And soon after the results, Chamisa's so-called strategic ambiguity backfired. Because, like it or not, admit it or not, Sengezo Savango was able to claim that he was the Secretary General of CCC using strategic ambiguity. And he started recalling CCC elected officials. And as we know, CCC imploded. So if you were SADC, you're going to deny Zanu PF political legitimacy, only to find yourself saddled with Zanu PF that you have denied political legitimacy, and an opposition that is just imploded. You can't walk away from Zimbabwe now. What are you going to do? One of the most amazing things about Zimbabweans is their failure to accept that the opposition primary task since the late 1990s was to implement democratic changes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That was the primary task. And the GNU was the golden opportunity to get those reforms implemented. Zimbabweans' failure to accept that, even now, is a problem of Zimbabwe. But typical of Zimbabweans, they want to make it somebody else's problem. They want to blame SADC for our own failures. Nelson Chamisa conned millions of ordinary Zimbabweans out there to participate in last year's election, telling them CCC was going to win big because he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. Of course, he was lying. Worse still, this is not the first time he had done so. 5 years earlier in 2018, he made a similar outrageous claim. He claimed MDC Alliance had stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. and conned people to participate again in that election in their millions, and they did. It's amazing that many Zimbabweans continue to pretend that they don't know what is happening here. And of course, such ignorance has allowed not only CCC, but Zanu PF politicians to exploit that weakness. We are not solving the problem by burying our heads in the sand and pretending not to see the problem. Here is Margaret Longo talking about the issue of why did CCC politicians participate in last year's election.
This is what I want to remind most of our MPs and other people.
Do you think they look at it as a business?
Yes, they look at it as a business. Because they look at it as a business seriously. Because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to parliament, you are employed. You get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
You get a pension. Then already, this is why people kill in politics. They kill to be in parliament. This is why we have violence in this country, because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the CCC party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system. And we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament. Because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way Zanu PF was going to rule alone.
You think so?
Yes.
Do they care?
Caring or not caring, the public would have forced them, because the majority of the people would want representation in parliament.
You don't need an expensive.
There we have it. Of course, Margaret Longo was right. In this particular case, CCC, even after SADC had said those election processes were flawed, they still insisted in taking up their seats. Why? Out of greed. Simple as. One of the problems we have in Zimbabwe is we have got an electorate that is ignorant, naive, and very gullible. I believe this whole demonstrations calling on SADC to deny Zanu PF political legitimacy is ill-advised, to say the least. People should be looking at, why did we participate to give Zanu PF political legitimacy? More importantly, to make sure that we don't do it again. But as things stand, I think one will have to be very brave to think that 2 million will not participate in 2028. If Chamisa was to come out tomorrow and tell them he has launched his new blue movement and is going to win big, they'll believe him. Just as readily as they believed him last year in 2018. This is how naive and ignorant the Zimbabwe electorate are. We've got to look ourselves in the mirror and admit we have a problem. And to think and expect SADC to step in, we make the mess and want SADC to sort it out. How? SADC gave us the chance to implement the reforms during the GNU of 2008 to 2013. We failed to implement even one reform. SADC did not talk us into participating in a flawed electoral process last year. SADC did not talk to CCC leaders to tell them to take up their seats. They took that themselves. Even some of the notable individuals like Tendai Biti and David Coulthard, they begged, they supported CCC taking up their seats. Indeed, they participated in last year's elections for their share of the spoils. Tendai Biti, he tried his best to stand, but he was outmaneuvered. But they had the audacity to say those elections where the CCC leaders had won the seats, those were in liberated zones. Of course, they were lying. There's no such thing as a liberated zone. Elections in Zimbabwe are so flawed that there's no verified voters roll. The lack of a verified voters roll affected every constituency in the country, not only those in the rural areas. Chamisa claimed that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes was just cheap politics. He did not even deploy election agents at all the polling stations, even though he had got the funding for it. My dear Zimbabweans, we have a problem, and the problem is ourselves, our sellout opposition that have allowed Zanu PF to blatantly rig elections and conned us into participating to give Zanu PF legitimacy. We need to solve our own problem. This is not a SADC problem. We cannot keep on applying simple arithmetic of grade 1 stuff to try to solve complex high school problems. It doesn't work that way. That's just wishful thinking. Next month, there'll be the SADC meeting in Harare. There are many who are making a big fuss about it. They want to hold a demonstration to pressure SADC to review appointing Mnangagwa as chairperson of the regional body, to review SADC's legitimacy, granting Zanu PF legitimacy. I think it is naive, to say the least. We should be concentrating on what we can achieve. We should accept that SADC had no choice in this matter but to ignore, do nothing about denying Zanu PF legitimacy because we had participated in the elections in our millions. We had been foolish enough to be conned by Chamisa to participate in the flawed elections. Accept that and start campaigning for the next thing. We'll start by demanding that we we want to start seeing progress being made in implementing the reforms to make sure 2028 elections are free, fair, and credible. And that if there's no progress, we are not going to participate in those flawed elections. That will make better politics. We'll be trying to solve a complex political problem with the right solution. If it's a calculus problem, we use calculus. It's probability, we use probability theories. But we cannot use simple arithmetic to solve all our problems. Thank you very much for joining me today, and have a nice day.